I'm not sure how prevalent this is, but I bet there are many people who wait for the latest iPhones to come out before getting the previous year's flagship in order to buy them cheaper. A practical and clever move. Usually, I'd say go for it. After all, the flagship of last year doesn't get obsolete naman once the newest ones arrive. You're still gonna get a tiny, powerful computer in your pocket. But this year, in my opinion, is different. Based on my experience, I advise you to skip the 15 Pro and either get the 16 Pro now or get it next year when the 17 Pro arrives. Hey friends, kumusta? I'm Gio San Pedro and this is my review of the iPhone 16 Pro. First, let's enumerate some of the things that have stayed practically the same between the two. Like the design. Without the camera control and the new color, you'd be hard-pressed to distinguish the 16 Pro from its predecessor. I'm not complaining though. Returning to the flat edge design introduced in the iPhone 4 was one of the reasons why I considered switching to the iPhone. There's also no considerable improvement on the speakers. Yes, they're good, they're loud, but they're nothing compared to the bassy front-firing speakers of the ROG Phone 7 Ultimate. The same goes for the 16 Pro's call quality.
It's serviceable, but nothing to write home about. As an aside, I thought with voice over LTE and Wi-Fi calling, call quality in general would greatly improve, like as good as the audio when recording a video. But turns out, we're not there yet.
The charging port is still USB 3 with the same transfer speed of 10 gigabits per second. Based on how I use it, however, that is already plenty fast. And finally, the dynamic island has not yet shrunk since its debut in 2022. But rumor has it, it's gonna get smaller next year. With those out of the way, we can now move on to what's new with the 16 Pro. First, the screen. It has a beautiful OLED panel, just as the 15 Pro does, but it's now bigger at 6.3 inches while having the thinnest iPhone border around it. What the spec sheet didn't show me is that despite the larger screen, it is still very much a one-handed phone. This is because the size increase happened more in the 16 Pro's height than in its width. This affirms my decision to go for the Pro over the Pro Max. Next is the color. If there's one word to describe desert titanium, it would be iridescent. I was worried that I would hate seeing it in person, so I was so happy that I found myself loving the color. It's sophisticated while having a dash of personality. And that bronze titanium trimmings, man, it's just so sleek. Moving on, camera control. It's okay. It's good that it's here. Rather have it than not have it. But it doesn't live up to the hype. For one, it's finicky, especially on on-the-go adjustments. It's so frustrating, in fact, that I disabled the light press and swipe, and its only function now is to simply launch the camera. Speaking of camera control, how are this year's camera? Let's start with the ultra-wide macro cam. It is now 48 megapixels, though the sensor didn't get any larger. The quadrupled megapixel count has its use during the day, especially if you're gonna go macro. But at night, better stick to night mode at 12 megapixels. The ultra-wide is also the default cam when shooting in action mode. This is because stabilizing requires cropping. I was disappointed to find out that despite being 48 megapixels, there's no option to still shoot in 4K cropped. It's still a choice between HD and 2.8K. The 5x telephoto now comes to the smaller 16 Pro. There were indeed instances where the 5x telephoto was just too tight, but in general, I say it's still more useful than the previous year's 3x lens. One would expect a shallower depth of field with this one, but nope, background is still pretty sharp. No lens blur for us, unfortunately. The main camera is now renamed Fusion Camera. I'm not entirely sure why they call it that now, but I'm guessing it's because you can crop or rather shoot in up to 3 more different focal lengths with just one cam? Right. Anyway, for most use cases, there's no difference between last year's and this year's. It's the same great primary camera, which is the only one that can be considered for professional use. And for professional use, the 16 Pro Fusion camera has one trick up its sleeve: the ability to shoot 120 FPS 4K videos in ProRes log. On the more software side, you can now change your RAW format from a very space-consuming JPEG lossless to JPEG XL lossy. Finally, the photographic style got much more robust, now allowing users to adjust a photo's undertones without baking it in. A step in the right direction, but it's still not enough for me to let go of shooting in RAW by default. Here's hoping the photographic style next year comes with a slider for the sharpness as well. Now, if you want your phone to last longer, keep it away from heat as much as you can. That proved to be quite impossible with last year's 15 Pro. Because of its power-hungry A17 Pro, even just browsing Reddit drains its battery and makes it uncomfortably hot. So it is with great excitement and relief when Apple quietly addressed this issue. The iPhone 16 Pro does still get warm, but at least it gets warm only when you expect it to. Like say, when using it to shoot raw photos under the Philippine afternoon sun. A phone's longevity is inversely proportional to the amount of excessive heat it is exposed to. So if you want a phone that will last you longer, skip the 15 Pro and choose the 16 Pro. There are many more ways to help your phone to last longer, like putting on a case. And if you're looking for something that's protective, premium, and cost-effective, look no further than today's sponsor, Spigen. On the Ultra Hybrid lineup, we've first got the Classic, which is an endearing homage to the classic iPod. Next, we've got the Ultra Hybrid Neo 1, which is Spigen's interpretation of an iPhone internal schematics. The Ultra Hybrid 01 is somewhat related. Nothing definitely inspired this case. And then we've got the Ultra Hybrid T. Just like first-party options, the Ultra Hybrid T has got a capacitive cover for the camera control instead of a cutout. If you're at least a millennial and want something that is unapologetically nostalgic, then the Classic C1 is for you. It really captures the essence of the first iMac and its 90s semi-transparent aesthetics. And finally, we've got Spigen's most protective, most feature-packed flagship case, the Tough Armor TAI. Like all the cases featured earlier, it's got magnets on the back. It's got a built-in kickstand, and just like the Ultra Hybrid T, it's got a capacitive camera control cover. It goes without saying that there's something for everyone at Spigen. Check out their website for even more sleek and protective case designs. Thank you Spigen for sponsoring this video. In conclusion, the consensus rings true that although the iPhone 16 Pro is a good product, it's one of the most incremental upgrades iPhones have ever gotten. It has a slightly bigger screen, a slightly bigger battery, a slightly better ultra-wide. You get the idea. The improvements are so incremental that it should have been called a 15S. With the S meaning slightly. But here's the thing, the S years are the times when we get the definitive versions of a phone, where mistakes that were left out from the previous year's overhaul are finally resolved. The 15 Pro reintroduced to me an experience I thought I already left behind. Smartphones inexplicably overheating and draining out. Battery and thermals should matter to you in choosing your next phone. They directly affect the longevity of the device. Skipping the 15 Pro then and choosing the 16 Pro over it is the more economic choice, and indeed a decision informed by foresight.